What's going on? This is Magic Mitch, and now that the final food challenge video of this tour has released, I'd like to talk about some of the final thoughts I have and experiences about this trip. And I'd also like to take some time to answer a few questions about the trip, because I think it would be pretty neat to give you a little bit more insight on the sort of things that take place in between the challenges while on these longer tours. And then to finish up, I'd like to take a few minutes to directly address something that I should have brought up a long time ago. And part of the reason why I also wanted to do this video because, first of all, I thought it'd be fun because it's different, and I do think you'll enjoy it and get some value out of it. But then also, I originally wanted to include more sort of vlogging elements into the videos of other stuff that was taking place on the tour, but I really didn't have a solid game plan on what I wanted to film, so it was pretty inconsistent. So then I just decided it'd be best to have some of those tidbits in the footage of the food challenge videos themselves, and then include a bunch of it here in this video. So starting out, as far as this food challenge tour goes as a whole, this was the longest tour I've ever done, which was about 71 days or so, and I finished this tour with 44 food challenge wins and only one outstanding loss, which I think is pretty good, even though I just fell short of my stretch goal, which was to complete every single challenge on this tour. I did complete my original goal, which was to get 35 or more food challenge wins with at least one win in every country I visited. So overall, yeah, it was a pretty successful trip. Now with all those food challenges, you're probably wondering, hey Mitch, what was the damage? How much weight did you put on during this trip? Well, I started this trip at 227.5 pounds and I finished at 247. So I ended up gaining just shy of 20 pounds, which that doesn't seem that bad for all the food challenges I did do on this trip. But let's be honest here, that number could have easily been lower, had I not just been so reckless with all the candies and the chocolates, especially considering the number of off days I had on this trip. And by the way, here's a little fun montage showing all of the mini food adventure side quests I embarked on during this trip. And now, I'd like to take some time to answer a few questions submitted by viewers. And the first question is, was there any good food adventures to be had outside of the food challenges themselves? And let me just first say that overall, I thought the food on this trip was great. First off, in England, there's this place called Meal Deal, and I don't know if it's around any longer. It's sort of this fast food shop where they have a wide variety of these mini sub sandwiches with different kinds of filling that come on the smaller toasted baguette bread, and you can get them for just a few bucks. And there was this one sandwich where it had this sweet Asian chicken teriyaki filling. Oh man, I fell in love with it so fast. And honestly, it made it difficult to try the other options because I'd been there a couple times in the past, and each time I go I get like 3 or 4 sandwiches, but at least 2 of those have to be the chicken teriyaki. It's just that good. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the place is in Birmingham. And if you're in the area and it's still around, I would highly suggest you check it out. And for any Brits watching, I did get to experience some cheeky Nando's, which I'm not going to get into any further detail about, but I will say this, I really enjoyed the food. Oh, and generally speaking, and this was a bit of a surprise for me, I did find that the brand name chocolates are a little bit better in the UK than in the United States, just in terms of overall quality. Of course, there are going to be some that I like more than others, but that was just a general observation I was making while on the trip. Also, I thought this place called Tesco, which is kind of like the UK version of Walmart, their brand name chocolate bars, those were some of the best value I've ever come across. You get this solid sized bar for less than $1, and the taste really exceeded my expectations. I even went as far as to pack some with me to take along on the rest of the trip once I left the UK. I thought they were that good. Now, a country that really surprised me, and it's probably going to surprise you that I'm talking about it, is Greece. And putting aside that egregious food challenge I did, there was a lot of mini ventures and coffees and frappes to be had, and all of those were fantastic. And actually, on the day of that challenge, since we arrived earlier in the day and the team challenge didn't start until at 10 at night, we had a lot of time to kill, and I did have a great opportunity to sample a lot of the local cuisine, both on the savory and sweeter side, and a lot of it consisted of these various flaky pastries with different fillings in them. It was almost like a food challenge in itself, and all of it was incredible and delicious. And it's a real shame that none of that was really showcased in any of the challenges that were taken on during that part of the trip. And the final place I wanted to mention is the Czech Republic. Now, just for some context, besides the UK, I was here a bit longer than most of the other places. So not only was I able to hang out with the Czech Republic's national eating treasure, Stewrod Redeem, but I also had the chance to really try more local cuisine, which is awesome because the dollar goes pretty far there. And as I mentioned in the videos, some of those food challenges really reflect well on the type of food that's more common to have there, like the goulash and the potato pancakes. And now the next question is, how was traveling during this trip? And I would say for the most part, it's not that bad. I've pretty much gotten used to it, even for the longer travels like the 6-hour train ride from Prague to Budapest. I mean, on some of those train rides you have some nice scenic views to look at the entire time, but others not so much. But for myself, the big thing was just to try to relax and keep yourself occupied with things like audiobooks and movies. Otherwise, at the very least, just try to get some sleep if you can. Now, not all the travels were smooth sailing during this trip. And at times, it does kind of suck carrying around those huge traveling backpacks, especially if you're on a train for longer than an hour, and it's packed with people and all the seats are taken, so you're basically just standing the whole time. Really, even then, there's not much you can do about it, so you just kind of deal with it and continue on. But I will say, there was one time that was particularly awful, and this is where Germany comes to mind, because one day, it was particularly hot and humid, and the AC on the train, it wasn't working at all. So the workers on the train were actually handing out free bottles of mineral water just as a safety precaution, so people wouldn't pass out from heat exhaustion. And even though that I was sweating buckets, oh man, Randy's sweat game, it was on a whole different level. We're talking like the entire shirt, just soaked and completely covered. And I remember at one point, we both gave each other this look, and without even saying a word, we both knew that the other one was thinking about just how miserable the situation was. Moving on to the next question, and I thought this was an interesting one, and it has to do with recovering after food challenges. Particularly, what are the differences between recovering while on this trip and doing a tour in the United States? And through my experience, I would say that it's definitely tougher overseas, mainly because there's just so many more variables that I found that affect me. For instance, you're definitely more out of your element if you're traveling to a different country than to say to go to a different state. Also, while traveling overseas, I'm carrying around a big backpack, which is what I'm living out of during that entire trip. And also on these overseas trips, you tend to cover more ground. So there's increased traveling time with the public transportation, and the flights, and walking to where you need to go. And then there's also the lodging, which in order to keep the costs down, we generally stay in hostels, which if you don't know what that is, it's essentially like a low budget hotel that's more geared towards backpackers and travelers. And the rooms could vary from private rooms to these huge 24 to 30 bed dormitories. So even though it does stay quiet at night, it does make it a little bit more difficult for me to get to sleep. Now, compare all that to here in the United States, where it's typically you put all your things into your car, drive to where you need to go, do the challenge, then drive to where you're staying, which will tend to have more privacy. So yeah, with the contrast between those two situations, I think it's definitely more difficult to recover after challenges while overseas. Next question, were there any language barriers? And overall, I don't remember if there were any specific times where language barriers were an issue. I think pretty much everyone we interacted with spoke at least some English, though there was one noticeable language barrier between Randy and Redeem, and it was hilarious to watch. Now, don't get me wrong, it's gotten a lot better over the years, but at the time, there was just a lot of pointing, grunting, and a lot of Google Translate being used. This next question, it's a pretty common one, and it's basically, did we do any touristy things outside of the food challenges? And the answer is yes. And I'm just going to highlight a few of the major ones that really stuck out to me. So the first one that comes to mind is the bus tour in Scotland, which that one sticks out in my head because at one point, we made a pit stop where the bus driver came out and he called these deer away from far, far away, where it was farther than the eye could see. And he actually hand-fed them food, which was pretty cool to see. Then in England, we did some punting with our friend Sophie, which if you don't know what punting is, and honestly, I didn't know before we did it, a punt is basically a flatbed boat, and you use a long rod to propel your boat forward. And when it came to that, Randy took the reins on it, and nearly crashed us into several boats, multiple times.
What Randy got us into. Oh, look at this.
And now, Mitch, your turn around.
No, he's filming you.
What?
He's filming you.
Oh, no, you can't. You've got to turn this around.
But to be fair, I don't think I could have fared much better. Then we went to Soccer Aid, which is an annual soccer match for charity, which consists both of celebrities and former professional players. Randy and I were actually invited by some fans of ours, and they had one of those fancy luxury box suites for the event with all kinds of amenities. It was awesome. And it also included a full course meal, which sounds awesome, and it's something I would definitely be willing to take advantage of if I hadn't just finished my battle with a big burger challenge at Bear Grylls. But that's okay, because Randy was ready to give me a helping hand, making sure that no food was wasted. Then we were able to see St. Mary's Church and Graveyard, which is in Whitby, which is where I believe that the creator of Dracula got his inspiration for the character. Then something that was even more chilling and eerie than that was in Germany, where we not only got to see the Berlin Wall, but we also visited the concentration camp in Auschwitz, which was just a surreal experience. Then in Ostrava, the Czech Republic, got to check out this well-known steel factory, while also hanging out with the man himself, Steel Rodder Deem. And this wasn't necessarily a touristy thing, but I'm gonna put it in here anyways, because it was still quite a sight to see, which was Randy. While on one of his very few off days on the tour, he attempted a gallon beer challenge over the course of the entire day. Spoiler alert, he failed, but he did get a lot farther than I thought. Challenge failed. And now, I would like to move on to my 5 favorite food challenges of the trip. But before we do that, if you're enjoying this video, then I would greatly appreciate it if you took a few seconds to leave a little magic of your own by liking this video, and let me know in the comments down below what you think of these types of videos. Are you enjoying it? And would you like to see more of these videos where I conclude the tour with some final thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below, and let's continue on. So when it comes to my favorite food challenges on this trip, coming in at number 5 is Zum Propeller's XXL Schnitzel Challenge. Now, putting aside my thoughts on paying for drinks, and that does include water, there's no question, I really enjoyed this schnitzel. I thought it was delicious. And I know some people are annoyed that I didn't use much of the mushroom sauce or any lemons along with it, but it was my first time having schnitzel, so I wanted to really try it as is. Now, I did try some of those things towards the later half of the challenge, just to get the full experience. But I remember, after taking a few bites of this challenge, I thought to myself, I've been missing out on something pretty good here. Coming in at number 4 is Meat Licker's Triple Chili Challenge. I would say it's just as much about the food as how iconic the challenge is. And I was pretty stoked about having the chance to take this food challenge on, because it's such a well-known challenge, and so many people have done it, including numerous food fighters. And actually, this was a pretty cheeky food adventure that was planned just last minute, where we decided to stop in while making our way to the airport. It was just one of those situations where you got in there quick, took care of business, and then made our way out. Coming in at number 3 is the Cakes of Daisies Dessert Challenge. And similarly to the Triple Chili Challenge at number 4, I love the presentation on this one. I also like the fact that it was suited to be a smaller, speedier type of challenge. And just like the Triple Chili Challenge too, I actually didn't think about doing this challenge, and it wasn't on my list until much closer to the time I attempted it. I'm so glad I took it on, because I loved everything on it. Now, for my second favorite food challenge on this trip, well, it was kind of hard to decide, so I said screw it. I'm throwing them all into one spot, because every single steak challenge on this trip was amazing. Which, all I have to say to that is, thank goodness, because I love steak challenges, and it would have been a real bummer to take any of these on if they were either overcooked or undercooked. And now, coming in at number 1, as my favorite food challenge on this entire trip, and that is none other than Tony's 40-inch Team Pizza Challenge. And first off, if you didn't think that the guy who wears turtle armor and pizza socks when he's battling pizza-related food monstrosities, that he wasn't gonna have pizza somewhere on this list, you're absolutely crazy. And when it comes to pizza, I'm telling you, this pizza was crazy good. It is the true gold standard that I will compare other pizza challenges with, and it is one of the best, if not the best pizza I've ever had, and it's definitely one of the best food challenges I've ever had, period. So now that I mentioned my 5 favorite food challenges on this trip, you're probably thinking we're going to talk about my least favorite food challenges on this trip as well. But you know what? We're actually not. Because we all know, I'm such a positive person, and I never like to criticize or poke fun of others or myself. You call yourself a professional eater? More like professional turd. Oh yeah, you heard me right. This thing was nasty. Oh my god. Gross. Whatever you want to call this grotesque steaming pile of hot garbage. Okay, so maybe that part is debatable, but I don't think we need to spend time on this. Besides, there's something more important I need to address. And yeah, I've talked about it here and there, but I felt like I needed to address it directly. And that is, well, that's Randy's illness. It's something that's plagued him for years, and I've known about it and even documented it for a long time. It's his phone addiction. Yeah, that's right. It's his non-stop, all-consuming phone addiction. And oh boy, it's one of the worst cases I've ever seen. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on all the details, but here are a few things to keep in mind. Number 1, I understand there are times when he needs to use his phone, but I hope with all the documentation I'm about to provide, you'll recognize that that is the exception and not at all the case for like 99% of these instances. And number 2, you might be asking, aren't you just as bad when documenting him? And while I understand that this sickness can spread to others, my response to this question is no. And that's because I'm only taking a few seconds to capture his crippling affliction, where each instance could be taking anywhere from a few minutes to even hours. And I know what I'm about to show you might be hard for you to see, but I think it's important to spread awareness about this. So without further ado, I present to you the evidence of my documentation of my friend's troubling addiction. Okay, so I'm thinking this is a little bit too much. So how about we switch it up and try to just enjoy it for what it is and make the most of it.
Access granted.
Now, in all seriousness, it's kind of incredible to watch. With the neck angle and all, seeing that affliction continue to plague him, it's truly heartbreaking. And I think there's only one solution until a cure is developed, and that is to simply continue documenting his disease, and to see how things unfold in future trips. If you want to check out all the videos from this tour, click or tap on the playlist on the screen or in the description down below, and I'll see you there.